The morning she brought the feds to my farm, she didn't know what was buried in the records. The engines came up the gravel road 3 at a time. I heard them before I saw them. I was out by the south fence, tightening a post that had been leaning since the last hard rain, when the sound cut through the morning quiet. Not one truck, not two, 3 black SUVs moving slow and deliberate, like they already knew the layout of my land. The dogs started up. The horses near the water trough went completely still, and standing behind the lead vehicle, arms folded, wearing that expression people wear when they think they've finally won something, was Sandra Booth, president of the Clearfield Ridge Homeowners Association. She had brought the federal government to my gate. I pulled off my work gloves, folded them into my back pocket, and walked toward the fence line. One agent stepped forward with a badge. 2 more stayed back near the vehicles. Sandra was already talking before anyone asked her to, pointing toward my equipment barn, my grain storage, my access road, throwing around words like unauthorized use, restricted corridor, and environmental concealment, like she'd been rehearsing them since Tuesday. She thought those words would break me. She thought if she made this loud enough, official enough, federal enough, I'd hand over whatever she wanted just to make it stop. What Sandra Booth never understood, what people like her never understand, is that confidence is not the same thing as proof. And I had proof going back 40 years. My name is Cole Darnell. I'm 54 years old. I run a working cattle and hay operation on 3 connected parcels in the western part of Harlan County. My father bought the first piece in 1984. When this part of the county was still unpaved roads and property lines drawn by men who walked the land themselves. Over time, my family added to it, leased adjacent tracts, recorded access agreements, filed boundary updates every time something changed. Nothing fancy, just the slow, unglamorous work of building a paper trail that actually means something when someone decides to test it. Clearfield Ridge, the subdivision Sandra ran like a personal kingdom, was built 12 years ago on land a developer purchased from a distant neighbor to ridges over. It had nothing to do with my parcels, never had, but Sandra had a gift for deciding things belonged to her. First came the letters. My tractor shed was an eyesore. My feed trailers were visible from the upper lots. My fencing looked inconsistent. Could I relocate my cattle to the far pasture because the smell drifted toward the subdivision on warm evenings? I responded once, politely, in writing. My property falls outside your governing documents. Please confirm your HOA attorney has reviewed the parcel boundaries before sending further correspondence. She sent 3 more letters the following month. After the letters came the visits. Sandra would park along the outer road, step out with a clipboard, and photograph my fence line like she was building a case. Once she showed up with 2 board members and a measuring tape and spent 20 minutes near my north gate doing something that looked official but wasn't. One of my workers told me he'd seen her pointing toward my equipment barn while talking to a man in a county planning office. Shirt, not a county employee, as far as I could tell, just someone wearing the aesthetic. She was constructing something, a narrative, a complaint file, dressed up in language that sounded regulatory. I started keeping records of my own after that. Camera footage from the north boundary, time-stamped photos, a log of every visit, every notice, every piece of correspondence. I didn't know then exactly how far she'd take it. I found out when the SUVs pulled up that morning. The senior agent introduced himself and told me the nature of the complaint. Possible misuse of restricted agricultural land, unregistered storage activity, potential access interference, a suggestion that part of my back acreage might fall under a protected development corridor. Sandra watched my face when he said it, looking for the crack. I didn't give her one. I asked one question. Which building did she tell you to look at first? Then I unlocked the gate and invited them in. Not because I was nervous, because I wanted them to see everything. We walked the full property. I answered every question the agents asked, directly, completely, without stalling. What each structure was used for when it was built. Which access road was county listed. Which parcels had been filed together, and when. By the time we reached the equipment barn, Sandra kept calling suspicious storage. The agents weren't looking at my property like a crime scene anymore. They were looking at it like a farm. Then the senior agent stopped at the east fence line and asked the question that turned the morning around entirely. He asked who held the original controlling parcels in this corridor before the subdivision was platted. I said, my family did. And I told him what Sandra had clearly never bothered to verify. The access road she kept describing as shared community approach in her complaint. That road appeared on county plats predating her subdivision by over 2 decades. The drainage strip she mentioned, mine. The back section she called a suspicious corridor, part of a legacy filing chain tied to my family's land records, going back to my father's first purchase. He asked if I had documentation. I walked them into the farm office and opened the folder. Certified survey copies, parcel maps, tax history, access agreements, boundary references, dated across 4 decades. The kind of records that don't lie, don't fade, and don't care about whoever printed the newest rulebook. Sandra went quiet. That was new. The senior agent studied the papers for less than a minute before asking whether the subdivision's current access and drainage assumptions had ever been reviewed against those older filings. The answer was yes. Quietly, informally, but yes. County staff had flagged overlaps more than once. Nothing had ever gone to court, but the flags existed. Sandra tried to recover. She said she had emails from concerned residents. She said the board had reason to believe there were violations. She said she had been given to understand that portions of my land fell under subdivision oversight. Given to understand. The agent asked where she got that information. She named half sources, a board meeting discussion, something a planning clerk might have mentioned, an old development packet, a neighbor who knew someone at the county office. None of it was verifiable. None of it was written down. None of it held. Then he asked whether she had ever entered my property, measured near my boundary markers, or coordinated anyone to inspect areas she had no authority over. She hesitated. I pulled out the camera footage. Time-stamped stills from the north boundary. Photographs of Sandra and 2 board members standing outside my fence near the survey markers. Copies of every notice she'd sent me, including the ones where she explicitly described my farm as subject to community enforcement. Language that had never applied to my land in any document, in any year, at any level of government. The senior agent read through the notice packet slowly. Then he looked up at Sandra and asked one direct question. Did you personally verify any of these jurisdiction claims before filing a federal complaint? She talked in circles. She said she acted out of concern. She said residents were worried. She said she believed the situation was serious enough to warrant outside attention. Then she blamed the county, said someone there had basically confirmed her position. He asked for a name. She didn't have one, an email, a written determination, anything official connecting my land to her authority. She had nothing. The senior agent closed the folder. He told Sandra they would be documenting the discrepancy between the complaint and the verified land records. He also informed her, quietly, professionally, that knowingly misleading statements made to trigger official federal action carry consequences that extend well beyond a neighborhood dispute. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. For the first time since I'd known her, Sandra Booth had no performance ready. She left my gate without another word. Within a week, the notices stopped. Within 2, the board had gone quiet. Within a month, Sandra was no longer presenting herself as the authority on anything that touched my property line. I didn't celebrate. Land doesn't teach you to celebrate that way. It teaches you to document, to wait, and to trust that a clean paper trail will outlast any amount of noise. My father used to say that records don't argue, they simply exist. And when someone finally looks at them, they say everything that needs to be said. Sandra had a clipboard, a title, and a neighborhood full of people who confused her confidence for competence. I had a deed from 1984, 40 years of county filings, and the patience to let them speak. In the end, that was enough. Because property lines don't move just because someone decides to stop respecting them. And history doesn't rewrite itself just because someone new builds a fence nearby and starts printing rules on expensive letterhead. Know what you own, document everything, and don't let anyone mistake your silence for surrender. Drop your story in the comments. I read every one. Subscribe. Next week, a contractor, a setback violation, and a building permit that should never have been approved, and the one survey pin that proved it. That one goes deep.